So I first wanted to ask about kind of the work that you do, so sort of animal communicating. What are what do animals say? Like what do animals normally talk about? Sort of household animals like dogs and cats mainly. I'm thinking about. Um, yeah, I want to know a bit more what's going on about what's going on inside an animal's brain.
Yeah, it's a great question. The animals, Jacob, they talk about everything. They talk about, just like with us, right? We have opinions, we have likes, we have dislikes. So there are certainly a list of questions, like topics that I tend to cover in my sessions just to make sure I hit all the important topics. So we talk about their food, their bedding, their house, what they think of their animal siblings, what they think of their human guardians. Are they getting enough exercise? Do they like where they go for walks? Is there anything they want or need? But in between all of the questions that I'm asking, they're talking about whatever they want to say. Like, let me give you a quick example. Our animals are so tuned into us and they're so perceptive of what's happening in our life. Well, I talked to a dog one time a couple of years back now, and she was like, I am so sick of hearing mom and dad complain about the air conditioner. Just freaking get it fixed. And I found out after the fact that they have two homes, and the AC unit in their Florida home in the United States had been working, but then not working. And they didn't really know if they should pay to get a new unit. But then they were complaining when it wasn't working, and this dog was just getting sick of it. So, they talk about things like that. Like they literally talk about everything that you or another human would mention about their life.
That's very interesting because from my sort of psychology background as a psychology student, in my head, I see that animals don't have the ability to like verbally articulate their feelings and thoughts that they have, and that what they would do is they run on sort of drives and instinct, and they're from how they've sort of interacted with the environment in the past. So if something they like or dislike, they'll want to move towards or move away from that in the future, etc., etc. So how did you extract from that animal this very specific comment about an air conditioner from their behavior, and how do you extrapolate that kind of information from what you're seeing?
Sure. So it's actually nothing to do with behavior, because when I do my sessions, it's just through a photograph. My clients are all over the world. I've never met any of my client animals in person. So I'm not even on Zoom with the humans. It's not a phone call. It's nothing live. It's through a photograph. I do it in my own time. There are other ways you can do sessions. I have done them on Zoom. I have done them in person, but for my main clientele, it's just through a photograph. So all I have going into the session is the animal's name, their gender, whether they are living or in spirit, and then their photograph. And then I ask for the names of the humans in the home and the animals in the home, just so I can give it a more personal read, so I can say mom or dad or your human sister rather than like a woman or a male. And so to your question about how do I get the information about the air conditioner, so animal communication is done through telepathy. It's called telepathic animal communication. And what telepathy is the transference of thoughts, images, feelings, words via our mind. So an example I like to give, because I'm sure both of you have experienced this in your life, is, you think about somebody and then they call you, right? Or you're like, you know what, I need to catch up with this person. I need to follow up with this person. And then they send you an email or something like that. Or what happens sometimes is a friend or a family member is about to ask you a question and you answer it before they say it out loud. Like, you know what they're about to say. Or if you're driving down the road and you just feel like someone's looking at you and you turn and the person next to you is just staring at you very awkwardly, like that's all, it's telepathy, it's energy. So when I'm connecting with the animals, it's done through telepathy, which is a universal language. It's nonverbal communication. So I might get, like I mentioned a minute ago, I might get words in my mind. I might get an image of something, it's like a picture of something I've never actually been to specifically. So I might get this image of like what I think your living room looks like, if that's where your cat hangs out. Or I might see their favorite trail where they go for walks, and I'm able to describe, okay, I'm seeing this very dense wooded area with this little narrow trail, and I feel like there's water to the right side. I'm hearing some water, and it turns out there's a creek or whatever it might be. So with the air conditioner comment, it's just a sudden thought implanted in your brain, and it sounds like my voice. It's almost like if you're reading a book silently to yourself, you have your own voice in your head, but it's just a thought that isn't mine. It wasn't there 2 seconds ago, and all of a sudden it's there. So animals, their primary language is telepathy. Like us humans, we are so restricted in our ability to communicate because we rely so heavily on the verbal language, the spoken word. But I'm sure you've seen the flock of birds in the sky. They all turn at the exact same second, right? They're operating through telepathy. There's not one leader. Or the school of fish. I think they're called a school of fish. I don't know. But in the water, they all move at the same second. Like there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. How does that happen? It's just one consciousness. It's telepathy. They're all the leader because they're all connected with each other and moving at the same moment. So it's the same with telepathic animal communication. It's just being able to connect with another being without having to rely on the spoken word.
Yeah. So is this something so it's more to do with animals? Like I can relate to the example about thinking answer a question before someone said it, and I feel like as more me and Joel have done these podcasts, I can kind of telepathically sense what he's about to say. But for people that are a bit more skeptical about this idea, like what's sort of actually going on? Is it kind of there's a cat, and you've got a cat, and you are sort of taking in that energy through your brain's connection with their brain or something along those lines?
Yeah, there's like this universal invisible field of just life and energy. And, have you guys ever heard of stories where, like, I don't know, let's talk about twins, right? Like human twins. One of the twins is across the world in a different country. Imagine one's in the United States, one's in Australia. And the one in Australia gets into a car accident or something happens. The twin, they like feel it. They know something's wrong. And sure, some of the people listening are going to be like, well, yeah, Nikki, they share DNA, right? Okay. But it's love. It's this telepathic connection. There's just this deeper connection that we have that we can't see. So on some level, well, it's not really our brain picking it up, because what can actually mess you up in this telepathy world is when you're too much in the brain, because our analytical mind tries to make sense of this. Our analytical mind is like, there's no way this is possible. I don't see it. I don't feel it. I don't know for sure. Because the analytical mind is trying to keep us alive, right? Is there danger? Is there anything around us? What do I need to survive? And among other things too. But with telepathy, it's kind of getting into like, I'm trying to not use the word third eye because so many people are going to tune out when I say third eye, but it's like, it's just this space between the eyebrows, like somewhere in us, in our soul, in our psyche, that is connected to something deeper. And for everyone listening that is like, this lady's a wackadoodle, there's no way. If for those that have animals, I mean, how many times do you just think in your head, we have to go to the vet, we're going to the vet, is it 10 o'clock, we got to go now, and then the animal runs and hides? Or you're just thinking about, should we go for a walk right now, and your dog gets all excited and runs to the door, right? Like they're constantly reading our mind. They're way better at it than we are. We humans, like we innately have this ability. How does a child come out of the womb, is born into the world, and knows to go to the breast to feed? That's just intuition, right? Like how is that possible? Like it wasn't like, hey baby, I'm gonna feed you now, here you go, right? Like they're constantly looking, they're sucking, they're going to that, they latch on. There's just a greater intelligence, and it's all just related in some way that we don't always quite understand with our brain.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I want to lay out what's going through my head at the moment and how I'm understanding this, and then lead it into a question. But at the moment, I'm reading a book called The Way of Zen by Alan Watts, right, where he kind of translates like Taoist and Buddhist philosophy to Western audiences and stuff. And actually, what you're talking about now is something I've been reading about at the moment, where the Taoists have this idea that there are two ways of looking at the world. There's the analytical, scientific, objective, like using language to try and define and categorize things to understand them. And then there's a more mystical kind of understanding. It's almost like an understanding of the world where you believe that you can't really understand certain things, and that just being able to name something and know its function and know how it's similar or different to other things doesn't mean that you really understand it. Like, we can talk about things like love, we can talk about things like happiness and sadness and anger and fear, and we know what the words are. We sort of know what they mean, like, because we've experienced them before, we think, but you don't know what you're actually talking about. We're just kind of decided to subliminally agree that we have the same definition of those things, but we may not, right? It all depends on what you've felt and experienced in the past. So it's very intangible. It's not clear and articulated. And I do 100% believe that world exists. So as much as people, maybe even myself, a part of my mind at the moment is skeptical, I also understand that there is a world beyond just language and definitions and scientific truth. And I think that may be the wavelength that animals live upon. Is that sort of similar to what you've been talking about?
Yeah, I agree absolutely with everything you just said, Joel. There's a book that just came to mind if you guys want to check it out. It's a really short, cheap book. It's called Kinship with All Life. Kinship with All Life by J. Allen Boone. And he has so many stories. Like, he's not an animal communicator professionally. He was just asked to dog sit this famous dog that was in movies and stuff. And this dog was so intelligent and was able to communicate with him in a way where he was like, what is going on? How is this dog reading my mind? Like, the author talks about how he would just think, like, he'd be in the living room, he would just think about, oh, like, what does Strongheart want to do today? And then Strongheart, the dog, would come running from the back room, grab his leash, and go stand by the door. And there's a ton other examples, even involving house flies. Like, we'll save that for another day. But, like, it's just wild what we don't know. Like, what I've learned over the years is I know nothing and anything is possible. And I wasn't always this animal communicator. I used to be a lawyer. You know, I had no idea that this world existed. It wasn't until I was 28 years old that I found out through a local massage therapist that she could talk to animals and that this was real. So like, I wasn't one of those kids that knew what my dog was saying or heard from the squirrels or knew when grandma was sick. Like, I played soccer, had hamsters, and, you know, did gymnastics. And when I found out that animal communication was possible, the first thing I did naturally was just go to Google and look up books. And I bought a bunch of different books from all these different authors. And all of these different authors at some point in their book said that every single person can learn to do this. And most of those authors hadn't learned until they were in their 40s or 50s. So I was like, all right, well, if all these different animal communicators from all over the world are saying that anyone can do it, like, I'm going to give it a shot. I hated being a lawyer. I was so miserable. I had a 2-hour commute one way. And I didn't go into it thinking it was going to be my full-time profession, because in my mind, that just sounded insane, right? How am I going to make a living talking to animals? Like, what? But it just evolved from there. And what you were just saying, Joel, about the book you're reading, like The Way of the Zen, there is so much more out there that we just aren't even aware of, because one, you know, societal conditioning, what's normal, what's accepted. In that Kinship with All Life book, one of the examples he brought up that I just remembered is that he talks about the Indians with the rattlesnakes, and so many the white people in the jungle were getting attacked by the rattlesnakes, and it was like white men. It was the example he was giving. But the Indians and the indigenous never had an issue with the rattlesnakes, because when the white people went in there, you know, it was they were putting off the energy of fear of, I'm going to kill you, like, you're going to kill me, I'm going to kill you first. And they were a threat. But the Indians and those that were indigenous there, there was this mutual understanding of, I respect you, you respect me, I'll stay away from you. And then there was no incidences. So it's like, there is so much behind the scenes that most of our world is completely oblivious to. And not that, you know, one way is better than the other or more right or wrong. It's just, we don't know what we don't know.
It's like, it reminds me of that scene in Indiana Jones where someone's playing the flute and then the snakes start, like, sort of going along with it. So it's actually like, that's actually a real thing. You can speak to animals through, like, music and stuff. Like, what's going on there?
It's just the frequency. It's it's coherence. It's just coherence. It's such a good word because so much of our life and society is incoherent, is completely dysregulated. We're stressed out. We're overstimulated. Everything is fast, more, better, there. Like we're not just in the present moment. We're always 3 steps ahead of the present moment, trying to think about what we need, where we need to go, how much money we need to make, and all this stuff. But the animals, they're so in the present, right? They're not worried about what they need to do tomorrow. They're not thinking about what they did yesterday. So when someone's playing music, it's just this energy of stillness and oneness and coherence, and it's nice. It's a good feeling. So I think that's what that is about.
Animals live in the eternal present. That's a proper nice idea, and that's something that even my mum's even said to me throughout my life. Like as a kid, you're curious and you ask weird questions like, if the dog just sleeps all day, how can it be happy? Do you know what I mean? Because if I slept all day, I'd probably get quite complacent and just feel like a slug. Do you know what I mean? Just lying. But like mum's like, well, the dog doesn't have an idea of a past or future, so it's just happy resting and being safe and being present. And I'm like, yeah, that's actually true. But anyway, I want to link into from what we've been saying there to a good question, which is, what are some key things, in your opinion, that people misunderstand and misinterpret about animals and the way they communicate, or the way that we can communicate with them? I'll give you a very sort of mundane example of myself, which you might find stupid, but I'll go with it anyway. Is I have friends who are very afraid of bees or wasps, right? And whenever I see them start to get in a frenzy about it, I'm like, don't worry, right? Just give the wasp a good vibe and it's not going to go near you. So I've realized that I'm kind of using your terminology in my everyday example without even realizing it. So what are some ways that people listening and me and Jacob can take away from in what we get wrong about the animal world and how we can maybe change the way we think about it?
I want to touch real quick, Joel, on what you just said about the wasps, because that's how I live my life, right? Like that, there's truth to that. And if your friends are freaking out at the wasps, they're filling with fear, right? They're constricting, they're in survival mode. I don't want to get bit. Maybe they're allergic, right? And that's putting off an energy. Whether people are like, oh, it's so woo-woo, like that's just straight science. Like we are energetic beings. I mean, look it up. Like that's not just me pulling that out of thin air. So like there's a frequency there. And the bees are gonna pick up on it. And if you're sitting there vibrating of fear, disgust, in survival, like I'm gonna kill you before you hurt me, you're a threat to them. So of course they're gonna be drawn to attack, get you out of their way. What I used to do, so in Pennsylvania, in the United States, in the summer times, there are a lot of horse flies, which I don't know if you guys have horse flies in the UK, but they're like these big flies that can bite you, and it's like a mosquito bite, but from a horsefly, and like way worse. It itches so bad for a long time, and they're massive. So we used to get them. They were all over the place. And what I learned is that if a horsefly is on its back, just like a beetle, they can't flip back over. Like if they're on a flat surface, they can't flip back over, so they die. So all summer, I would give these horseflies on their back a little stick to hold onto and then flip back over. And this was as I was like easing my way into the animal communication journey. I really didn't even know if this was possible or really what I was doing. But there was one moment where, so I was doing this a lot. And then I gave this one specific horsefly a stick. He flipped back over and he literally crawled up the stick right to my finger and just stared at me. And I was getting a little scared. I was like, don't bite me, don't bite me. And then I was like, Nikki, relax. So I'm just staring at this fly, just looking at me. And I was like, in my head, I'm like, please go tell all your friends and your cousins that I'm helping you and to not ever bite me. And that was maybe 5 years ago. And I have been bit by a horsefly one time since then. So it's like, our energy and the way that we approach animals and our intention really means something. So to your specific question, Joel, about like, what is the most misunderstood piece about animals communicating with us and us communicating with animals? I think for first is that it's not possible. Like people think that they can't talk to their animals or their animals don't understand them. They absolutely do. But so let's take a step back. The easiest and best way to communicate with your animals, first is the awareness that it's possible. But 2, it's talk to them, explain things to them, ask them a question and see what comes to you. So like if your dog has separation anxiety, I see this a lot with my clients. And some dog trainers here listening are going to freak out and think I'm insane, but I'm talking from my experience and what has worked with my clients, and I see it all the time in social media and people commenting. So this is my story. If you tell your animal where you're going, how long you're going to be gone for, what you're doing, why you're going, when you're going to be back, and you can say it out loud, you can say it in your head, it doesn't really matter. I like to say it out loud. It just helps me feel like I'm communicating better. They are going to understand and maybe not be as so anxious. It might not solve your dog's separation anxiety instantly, but it's going to make a difference. And over time, I think you'll see a change. So it's like the first step is talking to your animals literally like you would a human family member, because they're aware. They know what's happening. They know they love you. I mean, for all of us that have animals, we feel that connection. We feel that love. We feel that bond. So it just makes sense that they understand you on some level, right? Even if you don't think they're understanding all the intricacies of your mind, just talking to them and explaining things about your life, where you're going, what you're doing, you're going to see a difference. I mean, I think that right there is the number one thing that I hear from people, whether they respond to an email or a DM or whatever, like that piece right there. The second part is to facilitate effective communication with your animals. You have to be aware of how you're communicating. So just like with you guys, right? Like if I would be like, hey, Joel, how long ago did you start podcasting? How long have you been with this podcast? And what did you do before this? You're going to be like, you're probably going to answer the last question. That was 3 questions in one, right? It's like, what do I respond to? So if you're talking to your animals and you're trying to figure out what's going on and you're saying, why are you barking? Are you upset? Like, are you mad about going to the vet tomorrow? It's like, hold up, simplify one subject per question. Like, what's causing you to feel upset right now? And just like, see what comes to you. It takes practice. And when we're emotionally invested in the situation, like with our own animals, if something's going on health-wise or we're frustrated, that can sometimes block, the flow. But it's being mindful of the questions you're asking. Like, do you want to go for a walk today? Do you like where we've been walking? Is there somewhere else you'd like to go? You're never going to get a clear thought in your head as to what that answer is, because what are they supposed to answer? And the third thing, the final thing for now, and then I'll let you comment, is the number one thing I see people doing incorrectly when behavioral issues come up is, let's give an example. So say you don't want your cat jumping up on the table or the countertops in the kitchen or whatever. You don't want to say, don't jump on the countertop, don't jump on the kitchen table. Because when you say that, every time you speak, you're forming a simultaneous subconscious image in your mind, whether you're aware of it or not. It's happening and they're picking up on it. So when you say, don't jump on the table, in your mind, you're thinking about them jumping on the table. So your animal is going to hear the phrase, don't jump on the table, but then they're going to see the image in your mind of them on the table. You're sending a mixed message there. So they might think you want them on the table. So what you want to say is, keep your paws on the ground, keep your feet on the ground, or whatever. Like, you want to say what you want them to do. This works with children too. You don't want to say to your kid, don't put your bike in the driveway. What are they going to do? They're going to put their bike in the driveway. You want to say, put your bike in the grass next to the driveway. Huge difference. With dogs, like, don't pee in the house. No, paws in the grass, potty outside. Like, rephrasing what you're saying so that the words you're using are actually matching the image in your mind. The last example with that is if your dog always runs away or runs ahead of you and like doesn't come back. You don't want to be yelling, don't run off or don't run away, because again, you're picturing them doing that. That's what they're going to do. So instead, say, keep your body, stay close to my leg, stay next to my right foot, or like whatever you want to do. You could even get creative and have fun with it and say, stay within 3.5 feet of me. And watch that happen. Like, I play around with it and it's hilarious and it works. Like, my one dog, Donald, likes to always eat his brother's food. So I will say, Donald, 24 inches between you and your brother, and he'll back up. It doesn't happen every time, but he'll literally back up 2 feet. It's hysterical.
Say, like, there's a popular example of like spiders getting in. So like, say my sister's like Jacob, can you get rid of the spider? Can you put it under a glass and put it out the window? Do you think there's a better approach to dealing with that? Should I be telling the spider, like, hey, unfortunately, this isn't really a good home for you. Is it all right if you leave?
Jacob, I love that. And so I have two answers for that. One, yes, you certainly can do that, but it might not always work. So we recently moved to Florida, but when we were in Pennsylvania, we had a crazy ant problem one summer in our kitchen. And I don't ever like to kill things unless they're like harming my dog. Then I'm like, okay, you're pissing me off now. You're hurting my dogs. Like something needs to change. But I always try to like not do anything if I don't have to. So I was getting so sick of the ants on the kitchen counter because I was getting stressed out about every time I would put something down, I would maybe crush one because our counters were dark and you couldn't really see it. So I was like getting stressed about like killing these ants without even trying. So I was like, listen, so I had a conversation with like the soul of the ant, like the species. It wasn't like one specific ant. And I was like, guys, I'm like, you have, what time frame did I give them? I don't remember. I don't know if I gave them 24 hours or 2 days. I don't remember. But I was like, if you're not out of my house in 2 days, I'm going to use a chemical and you need to leave. And then I was like, you have the entire world to inhabit. You don't need my kitchen counter. Like I am a human. I am stuck in this house. You can go anywhere you want in the world. You need to go outside. And literally like the next morning, I don't know if it was the next morning or the next afternoon, they were gone, all of them. And I was like, hell yeah. And then I tried it again when we were in Florida with red ants and they didn't give a shit. Honestly, they were like, nope, like I'm staying right here. And it was a problem. It didn't work. So, sometimes it works. Not always, because at the end of the day, they're still like a wild animal with their own opinions and thoughts and instincts and intentions. But for the spider, like you could totally say, listen, it's not safe for you to be in this home because if I'm ever not here and it's just my sister, you might get squished, right? Like if I'm not here to protect you and save you, your life might end. So I really recommend that you stay outside. And who knows, maybe it'll work. But
also, this is a question for both of you. Like, what do you think of the morality of kind of like killing an ant? Because it is a living thing, but like people are kind of like, when you're young, that's what you kind of do when you're like a toddler playing in the garden. Is it moral? Should there be any case where you can?
Well, I think it really comes down to, Jacob, like, and not to blame our parents here, but it really comes down to how we're raised, because when we're a kid, we don't know. And I did the same thing. Like my brother and I, this is so awful. Do you guys have fireflies? Like they light up green at night, little bugs that fly.
We don't really have them in this country, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
So when we were little, we used to catch them and then my brother would squish them and then would rub the bright green fluorescent all over his arm because then he could glow in the dark. And my parent, like that was fun and normal because no one ever told us otherwise, right? So when I have kids one day, like I'm going to raise them to be like, hey, this ant, this is a living being. Like this is their home. So respect the ant, don't step on it just for fun. So it really comes down to like, what the child sees in their own life, what they're mirroring, what they're told. But like my opinion, Jacob, is like, why? I mean, why? They're still a living being, right? Doing their own thing. So I just am like, let's respect that the best that we can. But like I mentioned, we also have to live in this world. And if the animal or the species or whatever it is, for whatever reason, is interfering with us in a profound way, like, okay, you still have to be comfortable in your life. Like in Florida, we have fire ants and they hurt. They're red ants and they bite and it's a problem. And, we've had to do some things in our yard to kind of to get them away because I have 2 little dogs. And if they walk over an ant pile, like I can walk around them, right? But if they walk through it and they get bit by 100 fire ants, that's going to be a really big deal. So you have to do what works for you. But I also try the best I can to respect the other beings as best I can.
I think it's interesting, these sort of moral dilemmas. I think a nice thought experiment is to think like, a lot of it for me seems to be about the fact that there's a disconnect between like us and the animal's like humanness, right? And that's a very sort of wishy-washy, but I'll sort of explain what I mean. Like if if a spider could reply to you in words, in sentences about why it doesn't want to be sprayed with a deodorant can and then like chucked out a window or squashed, right? If it could say that is like, it could scream in pain, right? I feel like the way we interacted with these beings would be incredibly different. And I also think if we went about in the world and say you saw 3 pigeons in a tree and you could listen into their conversation, right? I think you'd have a lot more respect for them. You know what I mean? If you found out that they lived in a family and it maybe was a mother, father, and a child, and they were talking about what they were going to eat that evening or something, do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like if they had more human characteristics, we would feel differently about the way that we treat them. Because the fact they can't speak and they just sort of meander around means that maybe we don't recognize the fact that they also go through pain and also have their own subjective experience of the world, even though it's not like as conscious as us. So it's interesting. But then saying that, I probably sound very hypocritical with the fact that I eat meat, and I don't know what like dietary pattern you follow, but that's also a big moral dilemma of like, well, is that right really? Because like in the wild we would eat meat, but also it's a living being, and the way that they're butchered is very horrendous. So it's like lots of weird moral questions. But I want to ask, do you think there is any difference in, say, the species of an animal in terms of its temperament, right? Because stereotypically we tend to see like a puppy as very playful and joyful and fun, and like a snake as a knobhead and would probably like eat you. Do you know what I mean? Is there a difference in temperament across species, or are they all just quite neutral?
Are you asking, Joel, specifically in terms of like connecting with them telepathically?
I'm saying like, do they have differences in personality in the way that they respond to you? Because let's say your client comes to you with a puppy that needs to be potty trained, is different to a client who has a snake that maybe tries to bite their hand when they feed them, right? And would the snake respond differently to your work than a puppy? Like, is there a difference in how receptive they are to communicating with humans, and what is the sort of personality differences there?
Okay, great question, and I understand now. Thank you for clarifying. So when I do my client sessions, like I mentioned earlier, all I ask, yes, I did. All I ask for is the animal's name, their gender, living or in spirit. I don't want to know their age. I don't want to know any issues you're having. I don't want to know anything, because then that takes me out of telepathy, that vibration of universal language, and it puts me into my brain. And if I know that your dog is doing this, your cat is doing this, or they're 6 months old, automatically I'm going to be like, okay, they have a ton of energy, they need to walk more, whatever. So I don't want to know anything. So when I connect with the animals, they all have a unique personality, of course, just like we do, right? You're different than Jacob, I'm different than you. But they all communicate the exact same. So my sessions are no less than an hour. And the sessions are just as long if it's with a dog, a cat, a rabbit. I've talked to bearded dragons, which are like gecko-looking things. I've talked to cows, camels, like farm animals, pigs, donkeys, goat. Like the sessions are all the same. It doesn't matter because they all have opinions, thoughts. A really funny example that just came to mind is I did a session for a blind rabbit years ago. And one of the questions I always ask is, do you have any advice for your human, your mom, your dad, whoever the person is? And this rabbit said, mom needs to get new underwear. And I'm like, oh dear God, like, I'm not going to say this, but of course I'm going to. And I was like, well, like, why does she need to get new underwear? And this rabbit's like, because she keeps complaining about it. And like, she really just needs to do it. So after the session, I get an email and the mom is cracking up, saying that she literally just told her partner for the last like 3 weeks. She kept saying, I need to go out and get new underwear. My underwear is falling apart. Like, this is ridiculous. So they talk about that. Like they talk about everything. So I don't think I would be able to tell if I was communicating with, well, not that I think. Well, let me say this. I wouldn't know if I was talking to a horse versus a bunny, because they come through just the same. Obviously, their body might feel different, and I'm going to get a sense of how they're moving around the world. So I might get a sense that they're not in a house, obviously, if it's a horse. But in terms of the level of intellect that comes from them, it's identical. And when I connect with a puppy, I don't know their age, right? I don't ask for that. I naturally might get a sense that they have a lot of energy, but they're just as fluent in communication as the 15-year-old dog. So a question I get asked a lot is, at what age can you communicate with a kitten or a puppy? And I'm like, it doesn't matter. There's no barriers. With telepathy, it's a universal language. There are no limitations, which is why I can connect with an animal that's living, that's deceased, that's actively playing or eating or sleeping or whatever. With telepathy, the physical senses, the physical awareness doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm just interested because obviously we have these stereotypical ideas that like a snake or like big reptiles are dangerous and they'll hurt us, and that like puppies and kittens are cute and should be loved and looked after. But I guess a lot of it is to do with like evolutionary wiring of like reptiles who are big predator beings back, hundreds of thousands of years ago and stuff. So I want to pivot slightly to the general theme that I've picked up from what you've talked about in how we improve our communication with animals is about clarity. And, don't make what you're asking them too complicated. Keep it simple, like one question at a time. And also have the clarity to be present in that moment and pick up on this non-verbal communication and these telepathic messages. So, number one, I want to ask you whether that's the case and that resonates with you. And also then talk about how you kind of mentioned it a little bit, but I want to dig a bit deeper into your transition from being in law to then doing what you're doing now. And did you have to like train this muscle of presence, of clarity of mind, of being able to be in this world of energy and more non-verbal communication in that sort of spiritual sense? And if so, did you have practices, like physical practices, to improve that skill, or was it mainly research? And tell me a bit about your journey going from like when you first started out with the interest to being on this call with us today.
So what, Jacob, or Joel, I'm sorry, what did you say before? You mentioned three things before the transition from a lawyer and whether I had to train the muscle. There was the first thing you said. What was that? I don't remember what that question was.
So about how the general theme that I got from your advice on improving your communication with animals is about clarity and presence. So being simplifying the way that you interact and not making it too complicated, but also having the clarity of mind to be in the present moment to then pick up on these non-verbal forms of communication, and whether that resonated with your work.
Yeah. Okay. So beautiful. So let's start with the present moment. If we are, and you're absolutely correct in that summation here, the summary of what we've been talking about. If we are so busy in our mind and worried about our past, what we said, what we did, how we hurt that person, or what we have to do tomorrow, the emails, and we have all these strings from our brain, right? The left is the past, the right is the future. And I'm just saying that just for visualization here. If you have all these like cords coming out of your brain, tying you to your past, and all these cords coming out of the right side of your head, tying you to the future, and you're constantly pulled left, right, you're never in the center. You're never in the present moment. You're not even experiencing your life. How are you ever going to be able to settle your mind enough to pick up on a telepathic message that you're not going to hear it with your physical ear. You're not going to see it with your physical eyes. So on some level, you have to be grounded enough to be able to enter into that space. But if you're constantly pulled in all directions of things you have to do, things you did, whatever, it's going to make it nearly impossible. And also, you're going to see a lot of behavioral problems with your animals at home because they're picking up on your energy. They're acting out because you're a mess. Sometimes they are exhibiting behavior issues to get your attention, to help you improve yourself. Then instantly their behavior problem, air quotes, problem goes away. So the present moment, being in the present moment, is the foundation for this. Now, guys, I'm not saying you have to be this zened out, enlightened Buddhist monk, no stress, no worries, like naked living in the jungle, right? Like that's not practical. That's not my story, right? I was a very stressed out attorney when I learned that this was possible. So it really just starts with the awareness that this is real and that this is possible, and it grows from there. So the transition, when I found out, so I was a lawyer for about 4 or 5 years, and I didn't even want to be a lawyer, but as a 22-year-old in college, I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do with my life. So I was like, okay, I don't want to be a doctor. Let's be a lawyer. Like, why not? Right? So first year of law school, I was like, this is awful. This is not what I want to do. But at that point, I'm like, well, I'm already financially invested. I might as well just keep going. So I knew law was not my calling. And I was in Center City, Philadelphia. It's a large city in Pennsylvania. And I was in court all the time. I had a 2-hour commute one way. Everyone was miserable. I know one lawyer, one, that enjoys being a lawyer. Just one. Everyone is stressed out and miserable. And at least from, where I was. And then when I found out through a local massage therapist that she could talk to animals, and she wasn't doing it professionally, but she had been able to do it all her life. And that's really when it started, when the spark ignited for me. So I went home, like I mentioned earlier, read books, and animal communication very much is a muscle. It's not a gift. I'm not like one of the selected I'm not like the chosen one for animal communication. It's very much a gift. It's a muscle that anyone can strengthen. I teach students all over the world right now to learn this and to hone in on this and to harness the skill. So it's something that you have to work at. You have to strengthen the muscle. It's just like going to the gym, right? The first day you go to the gym, maybe you can't even do a single push-up. But if you keep going back every day, eventually you're going to get 1, then you're going to get 2, then you're going to get 3. So practice is key. I didn't really do research other than reading the books. And I read books in the beginning because I had to convince myself that like this was possible. It always made sense. I didn't ever think those people were lying or making it up, but up until that point, 28 years of my life, I had never known that such a thing was possible, right? So my only research really was just reading those books in the beginning, and then it was just practice sessions. And I would do free practice sessions for anybody that would give me feedback, because that's how you build the muscle. In the beginning, you really have to do a session for an animal who has a human guardian that can give you feedback. Like practicing with the spiders and the ants and the wild animals is great, but it's not going to build your confidence in the beginning because you're not being told like that actually was accurate. There's no way you would have known that. So a ton of practice. Yes, you have to train the muscle. Absolutely. And, when I found out that this was possible, I didn't ever think it could be like a full-time gig. I mean, because at that point I was like, I still do. I have a ton of student loans. But the more I practiced and the more that I got great feedback, I slowly, over 8 months, convinced myself that this was possible. I did practice sessions for 8 months. And I did like 3 or 4 a week for 8 months. And I eventually was like, you know what? This is real. Like, this is a thing. And everyone that I did a free practice session for referred somebody. And they referred somebody and somebody and somebody. So I was building like this initial client pipeline, this pool of clients from my free practice session. So I was like, well, there's something here, because if people weren't happy, they wouldn't be telling their cousins and their friends and their boss and all of that. So eventually I then made a social media, made a Facebook, and eventually then Instagram. Started getting a little following, like, I don't know, 50, eventually 100 followers. And people started talking. And then I was like, you know what? This is working. And eventually so in 2020 is when 2019 or 2020 is when I started doing free readings. July of 2021, I left the law firm and went full-time animal communication. So I would say probably January to July of 2021, I went part-time lawyer, part-time animal communicator, because I wasn't quite convinced that like this really could work. And I got to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to grow anymore in the animal communication world while still a lawyer, because it was such an energy suck for me. And it was just really stressful. I did not like court. It was not where I was meant to be. So in July of 2021, I was like, you know what, I'm doing it. And I just resigned from the law firm. It went full-time animal communication, and it took off from there. And, it was actually a very seamless transition for me, because like, I know that this was my path. Like, it just made sense. Not following it didn't make sense. And I have very supportive parents. And I don't think anyone thought that it would grow into what it has, but they knew I was just miserable as a lawyer and they just wanted me to be happy. So no one outwardly said, "You're insane. What are you doing?" But the day that my dad and stepmom came down to the city to help me, to move me out of my office, my dad was so cranky. And I said to my stepmom, I'm like, what is his problem? And she's like, Nick, this is hard for him. I'm like, hard for him? He's not the one as a stressed out lawyer in Philly. Like, what do you mean? So, like it was an adjustment for people that cared for me, but they just wanted, me to be cared for and happy. But I never really went through like people telling me you're insane. What are you talking about? This is nuts. Like I was blessed to not have any of that. So it was actually a really pleasant process.
Well, that's quite brave though, because I would have thought like, if I said that to my parents, they'd look at me funny. If I was like, "Oh, I'm done with I'm done with law, even though I've just trained, and I'm gonna go talk to animals." Like, was your parents? There must have been sort of like a reaction, or like that must have been quite hard for you.
Yeah, I mean, well, it wasn't hard for me at all. I was like, I don't care. I don't care if you're upset. Like, this is gonna work. But I think the reason that it was such an easy transition is because I did those free practice sessions for 8 months, like I said. And in the beginning, it was my mom's dogs. And so like she saw firsthand certain things that I never would have known because I didn't live with her, right? And, they're slowly seeing my social media build. They're slowly seeing their friends at their jobs talking about their free session they had with me and like, oh my gosh, like she never even met me. How would she have known that? So it was these little seeds that were constantly being planted for them to be like, okay, maybe there's something here. I don't think they understood it at first, especially my dad, but it got to the point where it was like impossible to ignore. And he just saw how happy I was with it. And now it's so funny. Now my dad, like he works at a police department. Now he tells, in the beginning it was, well, my daughter's a lawyer. My daughter's a lawyer. My daughter's a lawyer. So I would go visit him at work and all the cops would think I was a lawyer when I quit a year and a half ago. I'm like, Dad, I'm not a lawyer anymore. He's like, yeah, but you're still a licensed attorney. I was like, yeah, but I'm never going to be a lawyer. Now I go there and they're like, oh, Nikki, like, can you talk to my cat? Like, what is my dog saying? What do you think about this? So now I'm Nikki, the animal communicator, not my daughter, the lawyer. So it's just been a fun process.
I also think your story is really like inspiring because like the message of do it for free is something that me and Joel can definitely take, and also the viewers. Like, do something you love for free until eventually the world recognizes it and they pay you for it. What were you going to say, Joel?
Yeah, I was going to say something on a similar line. I think it's brilliant that you've been able to create a living off doing something that you love on a deep level, and that you were on a path that to the outside world looks great. I mean, the paycheck and the important work and the title of being an attorney and all of that, but on the inside it was horrible. Whereas able to come out of that darkness and into the light, and now you do something that you're really passionate about that affects people and their family lives and improves their relationships, and you've been able to do that despite the fact that it's a alternative way of looking at life that a lot of people may reject. But yeah, I think that I agree with Jacob. There's a lot that people can take away from that, and also the idea that if you like, for people listening, and me and Jacob can take something from this as well, if you're doing something that people initially reject or don't accept or ridicule you for, collate evidence that it works. I mean, and show yourself being truly happy doing that, because from your story, that sounds like that's what happened when you were working with people, and it was found that you could understand and learn things that you would never have any idea of. Well, that's evidence that something was going on there. And as your social media following grew, your parents could see that people were clearly finding some value from this. So yeah, it's really an inspiring story. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh yeah, thank you, Joel. And it's having an online based business is hard at times because people have opinions, right? Especially when they're behind a screen and they have a keyboard. So in the beginning, it was tough. I call them keyboard warriors because it makes it sound less scary, right? Like the trolls. And in the beginning, it was hard. I've been called like a fraud in probably 20 different languages that I don't even know what they're saying. And I look it up and I'm like, oh, fraud, scammer. Okay, cool. Like I know those words now. I've been called schizophrenic. I've been told that I'm taking advantage of grieving pet parents. And in the beginning, that really derailed me because I wasn't yet confident in my skills. And, my husband made a great point early on. He was like, Nikki, these comments are only upsetting you because you're not confident. And I was like, you're right. So now when someone says that, I just laugh and I'm like, well, it sucks for you because my life, I love it and it's really cool. And your life would be a lot better if you knew that you could talk to your dog, you know? So there was a good shift there. But it's to what you said, Joel, like so many of us, because I was there, right? We are working a job we hate. We're miserable. We don't like our coworkers. We dread 9 a.m. We look forward to 5 p.m. We dread Monday. We look forward to Friday. And like, that's not a way to live. And I'm not saying that you all have to just quit your job and, you know, go frolic in the wilderness, but it's like, what do you want to do with your life, right? I don't care if your parents told you have to be a doctor. I don't care if you've been told you have to take over the family business. No, you don't. Like, do you want to or not? Because it's your life. And whether you have kids or not, or a mortgage or sick parents or whatever, like you can make tiny steps to bring joy into your life. Maybe you can't just automatically quit your 9 to 5 and do something that you love because you won't make as much money, but you can do certain steps every single day to one day get there. And it's just allowing yourself the grace. And it's like I feel like we're raised in the modern world to put everyone before ourselves. But if you do that, you're eventually going to drown yourself. So it's like, take care of yourself first, and then you can take care of everybody else, and then you're better for everybody else. So it's like, what small micro changes can you make in your life to enjoy it? Because then the ripple effect is just ongoing, and it's just been a really great journey.
Yeah, that's really nice. I mean, like, believe it or not, me and Jacob get a lot of comments on our social media of people like rip into us and tear us down and like, oh, you know, people should have a license to have a podcast and all this, like, and it's quite funny because we laugh hysterically at some of these comments, right? And I think you'll agree with me on this because it's a sentiment from what you've just said. But I think, and people can take away this from the episode, that from my own experience, I know I'm young and, you know, only 19, and what do I know about the world or anything, but I genuinely feel like you can live a way of life where you are so happy. I mean, happy is quite a simple, wishy-washy word I don't like, but it's more like you're finding so much meaning and purpose in what you're doing. Mm-hmm. Anything in the external world, people's opinions, the expectations on you, whatever, you're too happy or fulfilled to care. Like, you reach a point when you find that thing, and I've only had like glimpses of it in my life, days or moments where you feel this. Once you get to that point, nothing externally can really rock your center. And I think, yeah, like you say, you can't just quit your job immediately and change your path like it's nothing. No, it's a slow process. But I think people would benefit if they tried to explore more into what grips them on a deeper level. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it comes, first of all, you're only 19, dude. When I was 19, I was just like getting drunk all the time. Like, so awesome, because you guys are just gonna like just be rock stars and superheroes at this point. So I love that. What you just said, Joel, is like, when nothing external can affect you, and not that nothing affects me, but when other people's opinions or whatever's happening in the outside world, and the war's over here, and the news said this and this there, like, if that stuff doesn't rock your foundation, you're free. Like, you're free. You're powerful. Like, you're in control of yourself. If the external is always in control of you, you're going to be on a roller coaster your entire life because you can't control any of that. So it's like, I love how you sum that up there, because it's like, it really just comes down to what brings us freedom. Whether, and you know, some people might say like, what do you want, right? And they want like, oh, I just want abundance. Well, what does that mean? Money, but for what? To be able to do whatever I want whenever I want, aka freedom, right? So it's like, when you're doing what you love and when you're passionate about it and you know you're making a difference and you're helping, like, you're free, and it just makes it a lot easier to be happier, and because you're free. Like, I just keep saying this 2 words, but like it's just like, yeah, it's just like the simple truth of the universe. If you feel free, you're happy. Because if you don't feel free, you're not totally happy, because you feel like you have to do something because you have to, or you have to do something for somebody else because you're told or they expect it. And then you're in those constraints there.
Yeah, that's a great sentiment. We're coming to the end of the time now, and I usually finish with a similar question. And I really like your energy and your enthusiasm, and I just love what you do. So end it with an opportunity for you to say anything to me or Jacob or the people listening, because we don't often get an opportunity in life to really express ourselves, and this will be immortalized via online networks like Spotify and Apple Music. So is there anything animal communication based or just life based that you'd like to say to the world before we finish up?
Yeah. No matter who you are, what you do, where you live, color of your skin, language you speak, if you have an animal, you love them, right? And you want them to know that you love them. And let me just tell you that they know, right? They just want you to be happy and to be in the present moment and to enjoy your life, because that's what they're trying to do, right? So just know that your animal, living or in spirit, knows you love them. And just know that you can communicate with them. Sure, I have an online school and I teach people and I'd love to have you as my student, but you don't need me. Read some books, practice with your animals, and just work on allowing yourself to be better, whether that means get more sleep, eat better. If your relationship sucks and it's really toxic, move on, right? All of these things are going to help you be in the present moment, which is going to help you feel a deeper connection with your animal. And, the more you're in the present with yourself and with your animals, your life changes. So if anyone's interested in doing this full time, it's absolutely possible. I mean, right now I just started a new program. I have 39 people from 11 different continents, and it's you can do it. I'm not some special person. I didn't always do this. It's absolutely possible for everybody.
I just add, for people asking, if people want to find out more about you, where should they go? I also got a very quick thing I want to check if you agree with that. Where the quote of "there's no bad animals, only bad owners." Do you think that's true?
That's a hard question, Jacob, because there certainly are bad owners, for sure. Bad animals, at the root, no animal is inherently bad. The question is it a learned habit? Are they so fearful? Have they been mistreated? Is it a case of improper breeding and their cells and DNA is just so schwacked? I don't even know if people understand that word. So messed up, right? So it's, it on some level, environment, right, is key. What's causing that animal to be so violent? Because at the root of violence is fear, right? So it's but we don't always know, is this such an ingrained thing that this animal, this dog, can never live in a human environment? I don't know. I'm not a dog trainer. I know there are certain dog trainers that work with really aggressive animals. So it's a hard question. But I really do believe that with proper training, attention, love, nutrition's key, right? If the animal's eating shit, it's not going to make anything better, because the cells of the body have to be well, right? So there's a lot to that. But what was the last thing you said about bad animal where to find me?
Yeah. If people want to find out more about your work, where should they go? Yeah.
So I am on Instagram and TikTok. So my handle is just Nikki Vasconez, NIKKIVASCONEZ. There are so many imposter accounts and scammer accounts. I'll never direct message you for readings. Don't ever pay someone on the internet. And my website is nikkivasconez.com.
Nikki, thank you very much. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you, guys.